I would never have thought that we would have gotten to the critical mass that we've gotten, whatever it is, 36 states plus DC or 38 states, whatever it is now. But I think the speed at which the sports betting was adopted just still surprises me.
The Business of Betting podcast is presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. 4 out of the top 5 U.S. operators personalize player experiences with Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. Learn more about Optimove by requesting a demo at optimove.com/businessofbetting. And if you like what you see, you will get your first month free.
What is up, everybody? I am Jason Trost, the host of the Business of Betting podcast. I'm joined today with Sue Schneider, who's starting a new initiative called Defy the Odds. But I've known Sue, or known of Sue, I should say, for years and years and years. And my memory of Sue was I was a young American in 2008, 2007, starting out sports betting in London. And there's almost no Americans in this. So not only was Sue an American in this industry, but she was also from Missouri. And you probably don't know this, but my parents are from Iowa. So I was shocked to not only see an American woman, and an American woman from the Midwest. So welcome, American woman from the Midwest.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, a lot of people, like, when they hear where I'm from, they're going, why? Why are you in this business? But, it was the internet. You can do whatever you want from anywhere, so.
And you did. So where are you calling in from? You have an amazing background behind you. It looks like the Lake of the Ozarks or something.
Yeah, it does look like a little bit. It doesn't behave like it sometimes. I live just outside St. Louis, and that's the Mississippi River. And I've lived out here for decades. And so it's a fun place as long as it's not in flood.
My parents are from Iowa, and my grandparents would always say Missouri. Where are you on the Missouri versus Missouri debate?
Well, it's kind of an urban-rural thing, actually. So because I'm in the St. Louis metropolitan area, I'm Missouri. If you probably go another 30 miles to the west or north of me, you'd hear Missouri. So it's kind of how it breaks out.
Yeah, well, my grandparents were definitely on the rural side of things. And my grandmother used to say they would go down to Missouri for cigarettes and alcohol because apparently you had less taxes on cigarettes and alcohol. So they'd make a day out of it, go have Chinese and make a day out of it and come back to Iowa and keep trucking.
What part of Iowa were they from?
My dad's parents are from Southwest Iowa, from Taylor County, and my mom's parents are from Eastern Iowa, from Iowa County, if you know where either of those are.
No, I don't.
And
if they're out the middle of
99
nowhere,
counties in Iowa, so
nothing to pin it to.
It's not the most exciting place, but it was very formative for me as a child growing up. So how does a gal from Missouri get into the betting industry? What was your gateway into this weird, wild industry we find ourselves in?
Sounds like a gateway drug there. I started in 1993 when Missouri Riverboat Gaming first came in, and was editing a print riverboat gaming publication called Rolling Good Times. So in 95, the woman that had that said, there's this thing called the internet. You want to partner with me to put it online? So we did that. And during that time, that was the very beginning. I mean, there were a few sports books in the Caribbean. Microgaming was probably one of the first online casinos, that sort of thing. So I got in pretty early with a lot of those folks, and, it just kind of went from there. I started a B2B publication called iGaming News during that time, and then in 99, she and I split up, and I took the B2B side, she took the B2C side, and so I guess I started out with really what was one of the first affiliate sites out there. In hindsight, now we know to call it that, but at the time, there wasn't anything else out there. So we were true pioneers in that regard.
So I guess it was the riverboat gaming industry that kind of brought you along to this funny thing called the internet?
Yeah. In 93 to 95, again, I had, even during that time, I was working with a couple of land-based casino companies. And we would bring some of the state legislators down to Mississippi and some other casinos that were existing down there on the land-based side. And that was kind of a trip, too, because those legislators, we kept losing them to the poker rooms and the blackjack tables when we'd bring them on these trips to go see what these other land-based casinos were like down in Mississippi. So when it's early days like that, you're all just making it up as you go along, which is kind of fun, actually.
And I mainly know you from your work in the conference industry, namely with SBC and a few other places. How did you get involved in the conference side of sports betting?
When we started River City Group in 99, there were one or two other companies out there that were putting on conferences in the internet gaming space. And we would market those, we would attend those, and we would think, we could do this. So we started what was called GIGSY at the time, Global iGaming Summit and Expo in 99. First one was in Vancouver. And it just kind of went on from there. I mean, we built it up over the next 8 years or 7 years, I guess, to 7 events and publications. We had iGaming News still. We did some books that we published and things like that. It was pretty nascent at that point still. So that's really kind of what got us into it. And personally, I'm not a big fan of organizing events, but that's why it's kind of ironic that that's what I ended up doing for 30 plus years. But, it's a different situation. It's our industry, even today, I would consider a small town. So it's not a real hard thing to do. It's the challenge is to keep the content fresh and have great networking events. And we had some good ones up in Montreal and Toronto that were really kind of crazy during that period of time. But it was fun.
What do you mean by it's a small town? Is that the fact that you know everybody, or do you think it's a small industry, or?
Well, obviously it's grown to be a huge industry, but I think in terms of the people that are involved, I mean, I don't feel it as much today because today when I go, people always say, it's like, oh, you know everybody in the industry. Well, I go to events today and clearly that's not the case. But it really started out very tight-knit group, I would say. It was easy to find out who to do business with, who not to do business with. And, it's still, I think, in some ways, and this was pre-corporate. I mean, I think that's the thing you need to keep in mind. This was before any regulation. This was before any attempts really at any kind of government involvement other than trying to shut it down. I mean, we had a group that we started in 1996 called the Interactive Gaming Council. We had 120 companies in that within a short period of time, and they were looking at self-regulation and trying to keep the federal ban from coming into place here in the U.S. So, but over the years, it's evolved into a corporate environment in many, many cases. So, today it's big companies that are involved with it, both on the operator side, the supplier side, the marketing side. So it's evolved over the years quite a bit.
Besides the corporatization of sports betting, which I totally can sympathize with, what are some of the observations that you have about the industry? Because I think you probably more than most people had a front row seat to watch the industry evolve the last 30 odd years. I guess 95 is about 29 years ago. 39 years ago. Wait, 29 years ago. Sorry about
29, yeah.
Don't make me do math. Quick math on a podcast. I used to like math, but now this is
That's what CFOs are for.
So what are some of your observations about the industry over those last 29 years?
Well, I think one of my pet peeves, and I've seen this over the years, and it seems to be rearing its head again, it gets kind of stratified. There's always somebody that feels like I'm more legal than you. It used to be even within our particular association, this Interactive Gaming Council, there was a period when there was an online casino member who said, well, we have to kick out the sports books because they're clearly illegal. And I kept trying to tell him, if you ask any attorney general in any state in the U.S. which one of you is illegal, they'll tell them that both of them are, because the AGs in the U.S., their attitude has always been, unless it's expressly legal, it's illegal. And it's come up with even more recently with some of the fantasy sports companies, now with the sweepstakes companies. And it's always been a hard time, really, for the state legislators to keep up with innovations that are in the industry. So in the meantime, there's always I'm better than you from a legal standpoint. And that's been going on for 25 years, ever since we started getting regulation. So that's kind of a pet peeve of mine. I see it again. And, not to say that one is better than the other in terms of the products that are out there, but if people have been exploiting loopholes for a long time, and it's up to the policymakers to either close the loopholes or legalize or whatever it is they're going to do. But in the meantime, I don't know why people keep shooting themselves or shooting other parts of the industry to try to make that point. So it's just happening again. And I find it just an interesting observation because it's been going on for so long. And with sweepstakes, I'm sure something's going to happen in some states to, again, either legalize it or go after them because it's not expressly legal. So we'll see how it sorts out. But it's kind of a pet peeve of mine to watch that decade after decade.
Great. Well, I'm one of those people. So, like, why am I wrong? So, I guess from my perspective, I try to be a good citizen, follow the rules. We have licenses, we follow the rules. And I'm sure you've heard all the arguments before. Why am I wrong, or why am I thinking about things the wrong way?
In what regard? If you could be specific.
In regards to the sort of the people who color outside the lines, for example, there's tons of offshore books that still sell into Americans today. And in order for me to go live in Colorado, Indiana, I had to pay 7 figures easily to go live, just sort of like to get table stakes. And if you're offshore, you don't have to pay that. You don't have to pay gambling tax. You don't have to follow any of the rules. You don't have to follow responsible gambling, yada, yada, yada. I'm sure there's some minor discrepancies, like moving money around is probably more of a pain in the ass, for example. But why am I not right to cry foul about people who are selling to Americans but not following the rules that these states set up?
Well, I think there's 2 answers to that question. One is I find it interesting. I mean, how long has Bodog, which morphed into Bovada, been around, and no one ever thought to send them cease and desist before? And now this one state after another is sending them cease and desist. Allegedly, they're complying. So I thought that was kind of interesting from an enforcement standpoint. But I think the other issue is that it's hard to encourage innovation and new products in the market because of the fees. I've seen Alex Kane with Sport Trade, for example, at the Nickel-G's meeting, National Council of Legislators from Gaming States, the policymakers saying, if you want to get new things into the market as products for the industry, then don't have $1.5 million fee, because any new companies coming in with new things are just not going to be able to afford it. So it sorts it out. So it's the big guys versus, other innovations, which is really kind of one of the reasons that we started Defy the Odds, is to try to help bring some new things in, some new ideas and that sort of thing. So we'll see where it all goes. But I don't think you are wrong. I think there are just people that are on the front edge of leading products that are going to be coming down the pike, and they have to find their path.
So I guess if I were to summarize your argument, you're saying it's fine for me to poo-poo it, but that's the only way innovation can happen if you're coloring outside the lines from a legal structure. Is that a fair summary?
I think there's a paper that a New Zealand regulator wrote that I finally found. And his whole argument, this was in 1996 or 97 when he wrote this paper. So he was very prescient. But he said regulation and laws will never be able to keep up with the iGaming industry. It just won't, because it's always going to be behind the curve. Because if you have private sector innovation that's happening, it's going to take a while for them to come up with a way to structure it from a regulatory standpoint to allow it to be there in a regulated format. And, I think that's proven out to be accurate. They're just always keeping up with it. So it's very cumbersome to go through the legal process. It's expensive from a regulatory standpoint. We have a sports betting initiative here in Missouri, and I think they've dumped $14 million into it so far. So, big numbers. And now there's some on the other side that are dumping it in. So all of that process is a very expensive process and doesn't really lend itself well to innovation, I don't think.
I completely agree with you. But as somebody I run a company, I have to decide what the risk parameters are. And it feels, I guess I'm going to repeat myself, but it feels, of course, if you don't follow the laws, you have more agency. I think, I guess a big area that this is happening is crypto now. Like, does crypto let you get to skip all these laws? Like, does crypto fall under real money, or does it fall under play money and play tokens? And I don't think that answer is clear. And obviously, if you take the point of view that it's play money, it's not under the purview of legislation, you have a lot more freedom to do a lot, try new things. So I think it's very easy to not follow the law, but it's frustrating to know when, I guess, it's going to be applied and not applied. I guess it's a little bit like speeding, maybe, is the right metaphor, where most people speed. Like, I drive faster than the speed limit, but every once in a while you get caught by a camera or a cop and you pay your fine, and and move on. Is that the right way to think about it? It's kind of like a speeding ticket, and you should speed and pay the fine when you get caught. I don't know.
A lot of it has to do with looking at the enforcement side, which has always been lacking. I mean, if somebody is going to spend $1 million, $2 million, $3 million to get a license in a spot, then they want to try to cut off offshores, which are very successful sports books that have been taking care of their customers for decades. And yes, they don't pay the fees for applications and they don't pay the taxes and all that kind of stuff, but they've not been successful at enforcement over the years. I mean, they can scare people, but really the number of people that have had issues, I mean, look at Bet on Sports and things like that, those are kind of aberrations. You don't see a lot of that. So until they figure out, until government regulators and people figure out how to successfully do enforcement, then it just makes it more of a problem. It's no different than the speeding ticket in some ways, because what are the chances that you're going to get caught and have to pay? It's a risk that you calculate and decide, okay, on this road, I know I can do it, because there's never any enforcement around. So
I think you're a lot closer to the U.S. government part of this than I am. Why don't the AGs go after this? Why isn't there more, ambitious district attorneys that are taking this up? Because it doesn't seem like it happens.
Well,
very
what's
often.
the pressure point? The pressure point in the past has been if you come through the U.S. I mean, I remember this goes back to Australian operators in 90s and early 2000s, and they would say, yeah, we're going to take U.S. play, and, I'll just bring my family to Disneyland Paris instead. I'm not going to go into the U.S. So if they can't enforce, the pressure points for enforcement are the money, movement, media, that sort of thing. I mean, if they can't impact those systems from an enforcement standpoint, then what's the pressure point? What's the disincentive for people? If they're going to stay out of the U.S., then what else is there?
Changing topics, what are some other observations that you have found about the industry over the years?
First of all, having been in this and being the age that I am, I mean, I'm old. I never thought that sports betting would be legal in my lifetime. So once, God bless the state of New Jersey for being as dogged as they were about it to bring that case as far as the Supreme Court after loss after loss after loss. But I would never have thought that would have gotten to the critical mass that we've gotten, whatever it is, 36 states plus DC or 38 states, whatever it is now. And the flip side of that is I would not really have expected, given that kind of momentum, that iGaming on the casino side is dragging its ass as far as it is. I think we're 7 states and it's just kind of stuck. I think part of that may be due to pressure from the land-based industries, although a lot of the land-based guys are in iGaming now, so that is a quandary, I think, for them. But I think the speed at which the sports betting was adopted just still surprises me. So that's been interesting to watch.
No, I completely agree with that. Growing up in America, when I was a kid in the 80s and 90s, it was New Jersey and Vegas were the only places you could gamble, and it was still considered quite illicit. And even today in 2024, when you say sports betting, oftentimes people think of Tony Soprano and less about MGM Grand and, these big companies that run this stuff, and it's more. So it did surprise me as well. Since you have a background in sort of social services, what's your take on the morality of the industry? I just interviewed a COO who had a degree in philosophy. We talked about that. I interviewed Bill Pascrell a few episodes ago, and we were talking about the morality of gambling. Do you have a take on that, having a background in social services?
I would say basically that I still view it as entertainment, and I encourage people to support the research in it to see if the problem gambling percentages, over the years, I've always heard it around 3 to 5% of the gambling public may have an issue with it. And so I'm going on that. And do you cut off, 95 or 90%, 97% of people's that are doing okay with it as an entertainment function. So I don't really have a problem with it. I do think we need to make sure that we devote not only resources toward counseling and early identification of people, and making sure that the staff in some of the operations are attuned to that and not taking advantage of people that are problem gamblers. And the flip side, I think, is having more tools. There's a company out there that's now working on the iCasino side that is trying to develop more tools for self-awareness for people that do have a problem with it, and not making them the sole, the one that you're targeting as having the problem, that operators do need to be conscious of their systems and build in safeguards in their systems so that when they see things that are going on with a particular player where they seem to be overdoing it, that there's a mechanism then to get with people. I think we have that obligation to do that for that small percentage that does have an issue. So I guess that's probably more attuned to where my social service background comes into play, is to make sure that there's, we're not just blaming the other people. The industry has the obligation to build in as many services within what they're trying to do. And I think, compared to when I got started, there really wasn't much of a support system there for people that were having issues. And now I believe there is more of one. So that's good.
So tell me about Defy the Odds. What are you looking to do with this organization?
Well, Paris Smith, Kelly Keene, and I have started this, and the intent is to foster innovation. I think for the kind of tech industry that we're in, we should have more. And whether it's within the gaming industry, so it's, whether it's the games or whether it's things adjacent to it, marketing, fintech, responsible gaming, all of those, we really should be encouraging some new ideas. And from dealings that all three of us have had in our respective careers with startups, we want to encourage more of that and give them kind of a support network to be able to bring those ideas to fruition. So part of what we're doing is helping to evaluate what seem like they would actually be good ideas, helping to support them, trying to get them financing, trying to get them customers, partnerships, whatever it is they need. And also working on the flip side with some of the bigger companies to try to help them evaluate the innovation side of things internally for them, and what would they rather be, what kind of things do they want to see going forward. So I've been kind of surprised that the industry isn't further along with the innovation side of things. So what we want to do is just kind of step in and create a community around those, both on the company side, the bigger company side, as well as the startups, to move forward.
So you guys going to hire a bunch of lawyers and help people skip all the laws and be protected?
Hope not.
I'm just kidding. That was a joke. We have a little bit of latency in the conversation, but I was trying to make the joke that you were saying that if you follow the law, you can't innovate, and you're trying to help people innovate. So what's your model? Are you operating more as mentors or financiers or all of the above? Like, do you charge startups? Like, what's your model in the world?
Well, basically, I think what we're looking at, ideally, we would like to start a fund or partner with a fund. That's kind of where we started, and then we found out what that entails. I was like, oh, speaking of paying lawyers. But, I think from the standpoint right now, what we want to do is we know who the investors are that are out there, and we want to make sure that they're aware of some of these. That's where, again, it's a really small town. That's a neighborhood when you get into the investment community to the industry. So working with them now, partially what I want to do, there are funds out there that are targeting women or targeting minorities, founders, and they're scared to death of the gaming industry. You'll never find them put any investment into the gaming industry. So part of what I personally want to do is carve out educating them a little bit, identifying those, educating them, and encouraging them, hold their hand a little bit, right? Maybe through one or two until they find out that, yeah, this is okay. We can do this. But other than that, I think we're going to be working in kind of a consulting basis, mentoring basis, and just trying to help support them. So as well as, again, with the tier one companies, to try to talk to them a bit more about how they work that and consult with them a bit on how best to set up so that they are open to innovation. And getting back to that regulatory issue and the fees and the application fees and things like that, for a startup, it's easier for them if they can attach themselves to one of these other larger companies that's already licensed. Then maybe they can go in, through that mechanism and not have to absorb those fees that will just keep them out of the game.
Yeah. Well, I hope you're successful, because I've said for a long time that there's not very much new blood in this industry. I think it seems to be consolidating with bigger and bigger players just sort of mopping everybody up, and there's very few startups. If you look at the players in the U.S. sports betting industry, there's very few startups in there, very, very few. And they're generally these giant companies that have either raised billions of dollars or they're legacy casino businesses that have gotten into this, or, the Fanatics or these giant companies that have already built giant businesses. And there's very little new blood. So I hope you're successful.
Well, you told the story well there.
We're about a week out from the election. What's your stance on the situation in the U.S.?
It's critical. It's critical. I am a Kamala supporter. I am really kind of appalled over what's happened. The division that's been unleashed and sold, and the fear and the anger and that sort of thing. I'm fearful. I really am fearful. I don't want to see us. And it's kind of a lose-lose situation, because even if it's something where it's tight, are we going to go through another January 6th, which I don't know that we could survive the next one. So I'm very concerned. So we'll see what happens, but it's kind of a tough situation all the way around.
Do you have a prediction who's going to win?
None. I have no clue. I wish I did. I mean, I'm in a very red state, in a very red county. What's been interesting to me is I have seen very few Trump signs compared to the 4 years ago and 8 years ago. So, I don't know what that translates to. You see with a lot of, I think the issue for how they're proposing things related to women is also extremely frightening. And I think you now see if you go into some place where there's a women's bathroom, there are sticky notes on the inside of the door saying, no one needs to know how you vote. So I find that really an interesting development to see that kind of thing. And it's telling. It's telling. So
that's a good campaign.
Yeah, it is. It's very homegrown. So kind of fun to see.
My biggest issue with the right, and if you listen to this podcast, I'm very pro-Harris. My issue with the right is that I feel like a lot of their arguments are bad faith, and Trump is definitely a bad faith candidate, even though I can totally understand why somebody would want to rebel against the system and look for, have real change happen. I think a lot of people feel like government has become too big and too slow and not helpful to people. And I don't think there's anything offensive about that. Who doesn't want government to be more efficient? Who doesn't want regulation to be more efficient? I think every American could get excited about it. But Donald Trump is such a fraudster, bad faith kind of person that it's so frustrating seeing basically half the country rally around this guy who's got, 4 criminal cases going on right now, and he's not a good guy.
Yeah. Well, I just have to hope there's more people like one relative of mine who basically said, I voted for him 2 times before, but he's just shown himself to be so negative, so divisive, such a bully. Bully was the term she kept using, that she just hit the wall with it. She's like, I just don't see this as being productive for the country. I mean, what's the point? I mean, it's just all lashing out at your own countrymen. Now he says, I'll go after you. So, as they say, listen to them when they speak. We'll see.
Yeah, take him seriously. Well, thanks for stopping by and sharing your journey and your perspective. Before I let you go, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Ooh, good question. I think this is probably my last startup. Defy the Odds is probably my last startup. So I don't want to retire, to be honest, unless health takes a turn for me or my husband. I have too many friends that retired and a year later they were dead because they were doing nothing. So they're going to have to catch me. But I think I'm beyond that question at 73 at this point.
Great. Well, thanks for stopping by, Sue. Enjoy the water, and fingers crossed for the election next Tuesday.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate the invitation.
Cheers.
The Business of Betting podcast is presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. 4 out of the top 5 U.S. operators personalize player experiences with Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. Learn more about Optimove by requesting a demo at optimove.com/businessofbetting. And if you like what you see, you will get your first month free.